Hello everybody, how's it going today? Glowplasma 231 here, back again today to talk about Kagurabachi, good old Kagurabachi, chapter number 58.1. This is a bonus chapter of Kagurabachi, and while it does not have an official chapter title, it may as well be called Genichi Sojo's Bathhouse Quest. Like I just mentioned, this is a bonus chapter of Kagurabachi, and really the first bonus chapter we have actually gotten in the manga, and what I mean by that is it's not like a small volume extra, like I'm pretty sure in Kagurabachi volume number 1. Let me actually go grab my volume off the shelf real quick. Alright, my volume of Kagurabachi has now been pulled off the shelf, and what I was saying is, like, at the very end of the Kagurabachi volume 1, there's a small 2-page bonus comic, as it calls itself, about Chihiro and, of course, his father, Kunishige, just messing around when they were younger, and, of course, getting that whole idea of, like, oh, here's the dynamic that Chihiro and Kunishige had with them, and that is, like, a small bonus, like, comic, like, it's 2 pages, it's not like a chapter of the manga, and what we have here in this chapter is actually an 11-page mini chapter of Kagurabachi. I mean, I can name you a few My Hero Academia chapters that were 9 pages and 11 pages that were either shorter or the same length of this chapter of Kagurabachi that were called full chapters of the series. Now, many of you may be sitting here wondering, oh, why do we have a 58.1 chapter of Kagurabachi? Why does this just not like 59 or something like that? Well, of course, as we all know, Takeru Hokuzono is a mangaka in Japan, and as a mangaka in Japan, bro, writing manga is hard work, and as we've seen with plenty of these manga in the past, I just mentioned Korei Okoshi, at some points you need to take breaks, and that is pretty much just what happened here. To take off the strain of writing the regular weekly series of Kagurabachi that we've all come to know and love, instead, Takeru Hokuzono pretty much took the week off and wrote a smaller, simpler story about, of course, Genichi Sojo, as we get mainly in this chapter, which is honestly probably one of my favorite, like, small, contained things in Kagurabachi, because, I mean, I think we all really enjoyed the Sojo Cloud Gouger storyline to start off the series, and just seeing more Sojo is just really awesome, but what was I getting there? Yeah, he took pretty much a break this week, wrote a smaller, like, fully complete chapter, and like, hey, small little thing that's happening here, to pretty much take a break and then get back to the whole, okay, Samura has just betrayed everybody stuff going on in the main story. Normally in these videos, I'd be going over like, hey, here's what happened last time in Kagurabachi, doing all of that, but like I said, this chapter being a bonus extra chapter doesn't really rely on any of that. It sort of is just like, hey, here's what happened previously in the series, is like, Sojo was a character, and this is what we sort of get here, so there's no point to go over like, oh, last time Aruha died, oh, no, so is what it is there, but as we hop into this little 58.1 chapter of Kagurabachi, of course, like I said, here on the front page, we get a little thing that says, like, hey, bonus chapter, Genichi Sojo's Bathhouse Quest, and a little bit of a fun image, like, oh my god, this is so cool. But as we sort of understand here, this is a little bit of a prequel to the events of the story that we saw Sojo in before his appearance in, was it chapter 8 of the manga, if I'm not mistaken? I mean, I've got the manga volume in my hand here. I think chapter 6 was against all of those, or chapter 5 was against those, like, sword guys. Then we meet Azami in chapter 6, if I'm not mistaken. No, Azami is chapter 7, my bad there. And then we get introduced to Rakuzachi and all of that, and we see the edge of Sojo's head at the end of, or we see a little bit of his face here on chapter 7 itself. And then we get fully introduced to him where he fights with Chihiro after, of course, killing the Dharma sorcerer there in chapter 8. And that's when sort of Chihiro and Sojo sort of start to face off properly. So this chapter takes place a bit before that actually happened in the manga, which is really awesome to see because I've not been able to actually talk about Sojo in a chapter review yet, so I find that pretty cool. So pretty much where we start this off is Sojo just thinking to himself, hey, before I have an important job, I have a crucial ritual, a nice hot bath. And then, of course, we get to the whole thing of like, hey, Genichi Sojo's Bathhouse Quest, and a little, like, asterisk, like, hey, guys, the main story is on break this week, which, Hokuzono, take your time, man, like, take your time, bring us peak every week. But we start off this chapter with Sojo just looking like he's leaning back in a hot tub, but then we cut to a more regular reality where everything's going on here, as this chapter is really, like, carried on a bunch of narration from Sojo as he just goes on his daily life, right? As he just thinks like, hey, today I am going here to the Kurushio bathhouse, a 5-minute walk from Kurushio Station on the Soya line in Tokyo. I don't know if that is an actual thing of the Kuroshio Station. Let's actually look that up real quick, because what else am I supposed to do in recording this video and not do my research beforehand? So what was it? Kuroshio Station. Yeah, it looks like a regular train line in Japan, so that's pretty neat right there. But like, hey, he's like, hey, I go to this bathhouse off this stop today. Like, hey, it's an old bathhouse nestled directly in a residential area. It's small, but it has a nice sauna, right? As we see that, of course, it's just like a regular looking facing building, and then there are 2 entrances, one for women and of course one for men. We see that Sojo walks in and meets Tai today, who is an old lady who works the reception desk, right? And we see that she is 78 years old, so she's getting pretty far up there. And Takeru Hogazono, come on. You are giving us the name of this random lady who will probably never come up again before you give us, like, the regular name of, like, any other character in this series. I mean, we still don't know any of the Makizumi's names, which is like, come on now, right? But we see Sojo just walks up and just says, like, hey, 1 towel set, and Tai's like, okay, sure. Sojo hands over the money, and she gives him all of the towels and stuff, right? As we see that Sojo just does some more narration, like, hey, recently down the road, a new facility opened up with a big sauna and soaking pools, and it took most of the Kuroshio bathhouse's clientele. And hey, I'd love to check it out sometimes, but they don't allow tattoos. Of course, being that Sojo has those big, obnoxious, like, tattoos on his arms up to his elbows, and then, like, there's little circles underneath it, like, where his abs are, and then, of course, like, the tattoos under his eyes and all of that stuff, right? As we see that Sojo is just thinking about all of this, and he's gone and gotten in the bath and is taking his nice big soak. There's a skylight in this bathtub, and he's just looking up through it, just having a good old time, right? As Sojo just thinks like, hey, I'll soak in here for a little while, I'll leave whenever it gets dark, right? As Sojo just thinks like, hey, my job today is to retrieve a certain item, the enchanted blade Cloud Gouger. And he even repeats it in his mind like, oh my god, it is the enchanted blade Cloud Gouger. So of course, we know how Sojo feels about Kunishige and Rokuhira, as, of course, in the Kagurabachi community, the whole thing of, like, I'm in love with Rokuhira is, like, such a massive meme in the community, right? As Sojo just thinks, like, hey, the Cloud Gouger was forged by Kunishige Rokuhira. It's one of Kunishige Rokuhira's trusted swords. It's a dream come true for me. But hey, I have a job to do, so I can't be getting all worked up. I have to relax my mind and body and be in peak condition. And that's why the bath is crucial. And we see that Sojo just takes his time, just sits in the bath, does all of this, and we see the sky outside starts to turn dark, as Sojo's eventually like, all right, it's time for me to go out here. And of course, what do you do after soaking in the bath? You go to the sauna. So he goes to the attached sauna of the, what was it called? The Kuroshio bathhouse. And as he walks up to the door, there's a little sign under the sauna door that just says, hey, under repair. And Sojo just looks at this, and he just thinks, like, what am I supposed to do here? Like, the sauna's closed. We see that he goes to the shower area of the bathhouse and just takes a shower, and as he's putting all the shampoo in his hair, during this point, we get a very good look at the back of course, Sojo here, and we see how far down his tattoos extend, and, like, come on, Sojo, that probably could have not been a great idea to get all of these random tattoos on your body, right? But he's eventually looking at the shampoo bottle after he sort of, like, is feeling it in his hair and sort of smells it a little bit, as he just looks at it and sees it's a cool, refreshing shampoo, right? as he even makes a note of, like, what in the world? It's mentholated. Like, oh, I don't like this stuff during now, as he sort of makes this little bit of a note that will come back up later before he leaves the bathhouse. We see that two goons have entered the bathhouse, and they start to walk up behind Sojo, right? And these two guys say, like, hey, sorry to intrude while you're relaxing, Sojo, but it's about the weapon we bought from you the other day. And presumably these are guys sent from the Hishaku, like, of course, like, I guess, like, underlings of the 10 main Hishaku members, as they just say, like, presumably this is about the Dotenseki that Sojo had given over to the Hishaku, of course, before his untimely death during all of the Sojo arc, pretty much, like chapter 17, 18, around there, right? As we see that one of the Hishaku thugs, I guess, is just like, hey, honestly, we're very disappointed, and the boss wants 40% back, probably referring to Yura, but we don't have any confirmation, not that it really matters here. So just like, hey, you guys just don't know how to wield it. I gave a demonstration, both sides agreed to the contract, right? One goon's just like, hey, the boss is pissed and that's not going to cut it, and the other guy's like, hey, this is really too bad. As we suddenly just cut away from this shot, and we see blood splatter all over the walls of the shower area of the bathhouse, and just one of these guys' arms just laying in a frame, presumably behind this. Yeah, both of them met a very, very untimely fate, right? We then see that Sojo goes back out to the main lobby of the Kuroshiro bathhouse, and he walks over to a milk cabinet and looks in, and as he's looking, he's like, hey, Lady Tai, like, hey, or he even calls her Granny, like, hey, Granny, there's no fruit-flavored milk in here, right? And Tai's like, oh, dear, I am very sorry, is it all sold out over there, right? And so just like, rats, this coffee milk's gonna have to do instead, as he sets it down on the counter, right? And he even says, like, hey, Granny, also, the shampoo was mentholated, right? And Ty's like, oh, I guess you didn't like it, right? And so just like, I mean, I do like a mentholated shampoo in the summer, but like, hey, it's October already. You should probably put that stuff away in the back and pull out a regular shampoo right now, right? And Sojo even says, like, hey, and if the sauna's not available, you should, like, tell your customers beforehand, right? And Ty's like, oh, dear Sojo, I'm so sorry about that. It slipped my mind, little dear, right? And Sojo's just like, hey, Granny, if you don't get your act together, that big bathhouse down the street is going to put you out of business. You know that, right? As Sojo's just like, sheesh, whatever, it's fine, right? And Sojo just thinks to himself, of course, in that narration, like, hey, today of all days, bath time was an utter disaster. But oddly enough, I feel generous today, as we see that Sojo is just thinking about the Cloud Gouger blade that he'll be getting later, of course, the sword from Kunoshige Rokuhira, one of his heroes, as Sojo is just like, hey, Tai, well, it's fine. I'll let it slide today, because today my dream is coming true. Of course, like, hey, he gets what he always has wanted, right? As we see that he picks up the coffee milk, chugs it down, and Ty's like, oh my, look at you down that thing, right? We see that Sojo walks over, puts the jar of milk into the, like, milk jar thing, puts the, milk jar lid into the, trash can labeled milk can jar lids, as he just walks outside of the Kuroshiro bathhouse and just thinks, just wait, Cloud Gouger, I'm on my way. And hey, that is where we end this chapter of Kagurabachi, this special little awesome bonus chapter of the series. And hey, I just really loved getting more about Sojo. I mean, Sojo is such an awesome character in the beginning, as like that first antagonist with the Enchanted Blade, and I'm pretty sure there are very few Kagurabachi fans that came out of that like, man, I can't wait to see this guy in the future, until you realize, oh, he probably just exploded and died. And of course, this is a fantasy battle manga, so there is definitely a world in which Sojo comes back at some point, which I am very much hoping that world exists. But at the same point, we've also got to realize, like, hey, Sojo may never be coming back at a certain point. So getting this little bit of like a deeper delve into Sojo's character is just really, really fun. Sort of recharacterizing him is just like, hey, he loves the bathhouse and he'll do whatever he can to make sure that the people of the bathhouse are protected, because at the end of the day, he loves the bathhouse and everything it does. And just seeing him like, hey, I'm gonna get Cloud Gouger today. So Granny, like, even though I'm saying all these bad things, like, hey, just don't go out of business because I love this bathhouse and I'll do whatever I can for it, right? And also there may be a little bit of a thing where, like, he kills people in there and, like, Granny Tai just, like, pushes it aside and, like, takes care of that for Sojo if he pays, like, a little bit of extra moolah. Who really knows? That doesn't quite get explained in this chapter, but we can look into it however we want to as fans. It's probably not something that's going to get explained again in the future, but just a cool little chapter, just seeing everything that Sojo's up to. And I mean, this is probably one of my favorite, like, pieces of the Kagurabachi media here in a while, just because, like, hey, as cool as all the, like, the Samura stuff is, and, like, oh no, Aruha, it really sucks you're dead, and, like, Hirohiko, all this stuff going on, it's still super interesting to be like, hey, we can still tell a story like this in Kagurabachi, even though it's only 58 chapters, almost 60 chapters long. But that's it for me today. I think I'm done rambling about how cool this chapter was, but yeah. Sojo is pretty cool, and I just loved his characterization through this chapter. I think I'm gonna have a little bit of an issue finding out a proper thumbnail image for this chapter, because, like, there's no good images of Sojo just, like, looking on besides, like, his backside, like, just a very small panel in the corner. So, yeah, I want us to figure that out, but if you're watching this video, you probably already know what I've chosen, and being that this is going to be, like, 3 days later or something after I'm recording this, so hey, I'm getting caught up on recording videos, so I enjoy that. But yeah, thank you guys so very much for watching this Kagurabachi chapter review. I know this wasn't a full proper chapter, but chapter enough. I've got plenty of other Kagurabachi chapter reviews on the channel. I think like maybe 16 at this point. Slowly getting through more and more Kagurabachi. But yeah, thank you guys so very much for watching. Of course, this has been Glowplasma channel. I've talked about tons of anime manga stuff on here, so go check that out if you're so inclined. And yeah, I'll catch you guys next time for Kagurabachi chapter number 59, a proper chapter of the series. But yeah, I still really enjoyed this Kagurabachi chapter number 58.1. Not a full chapter, but pretty much titled Genichi Sojo's Bathhouse Quest. And yeah, I'll catch you guys next time. Thank you guys so very much for watching. This will be Glowplasma, signing out.